for this little tiny indie feature film, micro budget, it was basically just the director and cinematographer wanted to be able to see playback of the footage after they shot it, which is not traditionally a super difficult thing, but in this case, it's a found footage movie that is almost entirely shot on actual security cameras. The Hollywood way of doing that is traditionally you fake the security camera look, you still shoot with Hollywood cinema cameras, and then in post-production you basically dirty the image to make it look like a security camera. It's a workflow thing. It's just it's a simpler thing if at that high level, but I understand why on the level that they're doing, it was easier just to buy. I think they have 7 security cameras. Interesting challenge. Yeah, I was looking forward to wrinkling my brain a little bit on it. The tricky thing is, other than the fact that when you shoot on some non-standard equipment, like, even on phones, something a lot of people don't know is if you tell your phone to shoot at 24 frames per second, a lot of times it's still shooting on whatever frame rate it thinks it needs to, and it's spoofing 24 frames per second because most phones change the frame rate to brighten or darken the image, and so you might not be getting actual 24 frames per second. I think a lot of the newer iPhones you can actually lock it correctly, but yeah, it ends up like a weird post-production thing. You end up with weird frames, and it's a weird thing. Security cameras, I know they tested them, but I was gonna go in cold if I was gonna go in just because it was so late in the process. I think they're shooting 20 days total, so it's a very, very small production. But yeah, they're shooting up to 7 simultaneous security cameras for this found footage thing, and they want to be able to, between takes or between setups, play back the footage, play back all 7 simultaneously. So you got to have some way to sync up all these cameras together, and then play them back on a computer at the DIT station. Different ways to do it. I don't know enough about the security cameras because I didn't actually look at the specs, but I'm pretty sure they're 4K, which just means you're gonna need hard drives. Even if they're shooting compressed, they're not shooting cinema camera stuff, but you're gonna need a sort of a grunty laptop and some hard drives to get started. But then you also need to figure out a way to sync all the cameras together. And again, the Hollywood way would be time code, which is a little like digital box with a cable that comes out, and you plug the cable into your camera, and it jams the time code there, and then you can plug it into something else and you can sync all the time codes, and so that way when you take the footage and you go to look at it, you can just say sync with time code and everything lines up correctly. It's incredibly useful. It's so useful. There's other ways to sync. Adobe, DaVinci, all those places now will sync by waveform, so it'll just look at what the audio looks like and try to match it up, and it does a pretty good job. But in this case, the cameras don't take audio, so you would have to either do it by time code, which these are little security cameras, so I think just whatever the time it says on the security camera is what it is. There's no way to, jam sync or anything, or at least not that I would go to. And then you got to do it visually, so that's where the slate, thing, that thing, you do that. I recommended they do a digital slate, so you could do it on your phone. So basically your phone just fakes a slate, and it shows a time code on it, so that way you can see the numbers scroll. Because if you're doing seven cameras, the chances of all 7 cameras at that one clap being able to see the clapperboard would be tricky. So it'd be nice to see the scroll, so you could. And it's neither here nor there. My recommendation was if those cameras at all have any way of collecting audio, that would be the ideal. It doesn't even have to be the audio of the actors. It just needs a noise that all the cameras can see at the same time, or hear at the same time. I think that would be the easiest way to do it. The film school way of doing it is one of 3 ways. The we'll fix it in post way, which is a terrible idea way, is you just, you record what you record, and you hope that you can get, if the camera records any audio, you can line up that audio with the audio you recorded, syncing waveforms. Again, most of the editing programs will do it reasonably well these days. Not perfect. You always got to check, but pretty good these days. But even if, I feel like in film school, a lot of the cameras intentionally, even if they could record audio, they wouldn't let us. So we would have to find a way to sync sound later, which is why you get a clapperboard. I've done it the hard way too. I've done it the horrible way, which is you just look at people's mouths and you just scoot the audio back and forth until it looks like what they're saying. Yeah, it sucks. It takes forever. So that's the worst way to do it. That's the fix and post way. Second way is a proper clapperboard where all the cameras at the same time can see the clapperboard, clap it, and you can also, you hear that note. So hopefully the cameras are recording some kind of scratch audio, which is just audio. And you can see that, you can lock it in that way. And then number 3 is obviously time code, where there's some sort of time code jamming system. Different cameras do it in different ways, but there's ways to do it. And if you can get a sync slate, a time code controlled slate with the countdown on it, or the numbers on it, that's the digital numbers, that's the sweet spot. So, but as far as syncing up a bunch of security cameras, I sort of went down a bit of a rabbit hole because, security cameras are not the same thing as like consumer, like a Canon DSLR, for instance. If you take like a Canon 5D Mark II, the most technologically fancy way to sync sound would be to do time code, and you'd have to get something like a tentacle sync, something that has its own way of sending audio time code, because that kind of camera just doesn't take time code. So it's basically just getting like noise, and then you use tentacle sync software in post-production to turn the noise into time code. That can be done, but as far as 7 cameras, because I've sort of lost my train of thought. Because they're security cameras, they're meant to be networked. They're meant to all not talk to each other, but all sort of funnel into the control center, a big TV in theory. So there's probably a way to either simultaneously trigger a record, which would hopefully get you at least close to getting them all in sync. It's probably not perfect, especially if the cables are different lengths or something. I don't know. I feel like all security cameras just don't sync up perfectly, just because it's not like a priority for security. Anyway, but there might be a way to simultaneously record all at the same time, which would get you pretty close. Or there might be a way to all of them share a time code, or share a date and time number, manually enter the time, including the seconds and maybe the frames if you have control over that, and then just make sure they all share that. Yeah, so maybe the solution could be basically recreate the security desk at like a hotel or wherever with 7 cameras and use that software. I feel like if it's proper security camera stuff, that stuff is all proprietary, and not only is it not flexible, but I feel like it would be so expensive to even rent, because it's not made for filmmaking. It's made for a completely different industry. So I'm talking myself out of that now. How I would do it, assuming the cameras they don't have microphones on them, so you'd have to find a way to port in audio. I think the cheapest, and it's just going to be a struggle to get through post way of doing it, would be take a phone or an iPad or something and put a digital slate on there with the countdown, and then just make sure that every single camera sees the slate before you start. I think that'd probably be the fastest way to do it, or the I guess cheapest way to do it. And the other way would be I would try to find a way, especially because I've been doing like a lot of like live AV stuff lately. I would find a way to get whatever the audio feed is, like a master audio feed, and get it to go to all the cameras so that they all share identical audio. That way you could just tell, Adobe Premiere just to line up the waveforms and you're done. That's how I would do it. It took a long time to get to that. logic, though. I know it sounds, now that I say it out loud, it doesn't sound that complicated, but so it's part of it is I've been doing, yeah, I've been doing a lot of like live audio video stuff lately, so I've been experiencing a lot more of how to handle multiple cameras and that kind of stuff. Whereas, especially like film school, you kind of expect just to have the one camera. Even for the school I was at did like a lecture series with filmmakers that would come in and do interviews and stuff, and it was a whole it was a whole thing. I can't say what it was because they they're not paying me to talk about them, so I'm not going to say what it was. But yeah, even then with multiple cameras, I don't think they had like a control center like you would at a TV studio where you could see it all and have control over it that way. I think at best they had a director in the back looking at it, a multi-view of the screen with all the different cameras on it. But I don't think they were live switching where they were cutting between cameras live. I don't think they were doing any of that sort of TV broadcast stuff. I think they were just recording it with the expectation to cut it later. Yeah, interesting way for these indie filmmakers to be doing it with the security camera footage. Maybe they got just a can't pass up deal on these 7 security cameras. That's a possibility. Yeah, if it were me and I would probably you'd bench test stuff. I think that's the first thing I would do is I would bench test a couple different types of security cameras way ahead of production, just to see how they're going to work when you actually handle them. Because the other thing about security cameras is you're kind of just supposed to just mount them and let them be, and so they don't have a bunch of stuff like extra buttons or controls or a good way to mount them that you could without having to bring in other equipment to mount them with. So I would try to test them and try to see just how flexible they are, how movable they are, because they're gonna get messed with a lot, which is not an inherent security camera thing. But also, yeah, my mind just goes back to just either renting or buying just a bunch of the identical same camcorder or cinema camera, but probably camcorder, with just a lot more features that are more filmmaking focused. That way you have a little bit more control, even if you don't need it, that kind of thing. And then depending on how high up the ladder you go on the rental, you can get stuff like time code or something that is a little bit more doable. So I don't know. It's a very interesting idea. I told them hit me up when they're done. I'd love to see what it looks like. So good for them. Every film is impossible to make. That's just the nature of the beast. And so they should be getting it done. And as long as they get it done, good for them. If they don't get it done, they need to get it done, because it doesn't exist until you put it out there. That's kind of what it is. So I don't know. This was a weird technical deep dive, but it was also because my brain is broken and it's what I've been thinking about. So would you guys have done it differently? Do you guys care about any of this? This is not story stuff. This is literally just technical problem solving, like right brain kind of crap. I find it satisfying. Most of my film school buddies look at me like I'm an alien visiting Earth for the first time, and I'm trying to introduce myself to a dog as the leaders of the world in that kind of situation. But anyway, let me know what you think. Like, subscribe. Catch you next time.